Hi, you're back in the room with Bryony from Pragmatic Consultancy. Hello and welcome to the Pink Room with Bryony, owner of Pragmatic Consultancy, helping professionals and businesses take confident action, lead with clarity, and grow with purpose. So, this podcast is your honest space to come behind the scenes with me on building impact without burnout, leadership without ego, and progress that hopefully makes you feel good. So, whether you're here to be inspired, mentored, or just reminded you're not alone, you are in the right room. So, let's get started. So, today we are going to cover what no one tells you about compliance and why it's more human than you think. So, I got told at a conference, don't mention the word compliance. No one likes compliance. And I'm like, I know no one likes compliance, but at the end of the day, we do compliance activities every day. You know, there are a huge amount of different compliance that we have to do, you know, and what I want to do is touch on some of these issues that we have. Compliance issues have usually come about because something's gone wrong, usually horribly wrong. Majority of the time, it's probably caused a fatality. And one of the key purposes, especially if you're in business, is to make sure that all of your employees get home and can see their families. No one wants to intentionally kill anyone. So when we talk about compliance, we're talking about activities that enable a company to do the right thing, create the right situation, and have the right tools and processes in place to ensure that that person stays safe and can go home. And when I talk about compliance, when you look at a subject like that and put it in that format, I think most of you would agree, yes, number one, I want to go home and see my family. And number two, I want to stay safe. I don't want to lose a finger, a leg, an arm, or, any other part of your body. The whole point around compliance for me is about personal care and duty of care. I think sometimes, and I think this probably comes back to if you caught my episode 1 where I spoke about a bit about my background and where I've worked and what I've done. I think a lot of this has come from, I used to work in heavy manufacturing, oil and gas, and health and safety was a priority. At the end of the day, it was about getting people home. And unfortunately, some people didn't get home in some of the jobs that we've been involved in. So I think it does depend on how you have experienced life, and around that understanding of, when I use the word compliance, I want to really humanize that word. That word to me is I want to make sure that you get home safe. I want you to make sure that you're doing something that really adds value, and is number one, a passion of mine is protecting the planet. Number two could be protecting you, protecting your family, protecting the business that you're doing, protecting your colleagues. It is very much a nurturing word to me. So when someone said, oh, you shouldn't use that word because people don't like it, it really jarred against my beliefs, because I think we should really want to be able to make sure that we're doing the best thing and the best thing for everyone, including us, and whoever we work for. This could be just completely my opinion. So feel free to let me know if you feel that you've had terminology which you haven't been able to relate to, and how that word has been utilized to you. Is another example. So when I think about compliance, so obviously I've come from quite a heavy industry auditing background, is compliance to me is to validate that you're doing the right thing in the right place at the right time, because I don't want you to have wasted effort, inefficiencies, and I want you to feel good about the job you do. But if you, there are circumstances where I've had people turn around to me and going, but I've always done it this way, and this is the way that I want to do it, and this is how I do it, you know, mm, what is what someone sees as an inefficiency is just the way that that person does their work, not necessarily in a good or a bad way. I think the key thing that sometimes when we kind of then go through and look at how that's being described is, okay, so show me how that adds X, Y, and Z to the end product. And as long as you can show that succession conversation, I think and that there's an added benefit, then I'm not the one to turn around and say, oh, you shouldn't be doing like that because of X, Y, and Z. I'm really interested if you've come up with a better way of working, which is more efficient, more effective than the way that the procedure states it or the work instruction states it, then, that's something to be celebrated. But again, we want to make sure everyone gets home. So it's making sure that that process is then documented and safe and, validated. So the next time someone else does it, everyone's doing it the same way. And also, if it is a more efficient and more effective process, then why are we not capturing that and celebrating that? Now, I know some of you will be going, yeah, but there's just some things in my life that, you know, it's, the thing that I've got in my head is that people go, especially around health and safety, they're like, it's just health and safety gone mad. You know, some examples would be is that we have seatbelts. So that is a clear example of where I can remember times where we used to just jump around in the back seat of the cars without any seatbelts on. As a baby, we're in a carry cart on the back seat. It was not necessarily mandatory, and my dad's still got some cars where, it doesn't have seatbelts. So it's about, what kind of things do you do which are personal compliance on a day-to-day basis? Is there things that you do that you suddenly go, oh, actually, a prime one would be you don't go out and steal, rob people in the streets. I'm assuming you don't. You stay out of trouble, so you're generally being compliant to the society norms of making sure that from a business point of view, you are enabling what you need to do on a business point of view. So it's about staying compliant to your business, what you want to do and your social values. So not wearing a seatbelt, obviously that can get you, now don't quote me because I haven't looked it up, but that can get you a hefty fine. But the reason for wearing a seatbelt is about staying alive in a crash, protecting others just from injury. Because if you're not wearing your seatbelt and you're sat behind me in the back seat, you will fly forward and you will crush certain bits of my anatomy. So it's making sure that you and yourself in the car stay alive. That is just an example. So there are many examples around there. I think some of the other compliance ones was, washing your hands, especially in COVID, is transmission of diseases. And I know I'm picking up topics that could be controversial depending on your view of things. But I think the acceptance is the view of keeping yourself and others safe, and making sure that you can get home to your families. Because at the end of the day, this is why, you're you tend to be working or providing for, or it could just be for yourself and dogs. But the word is making sure that you, as a person, are applying compliance in your daily life to ensure that you get home to people. And that's kind of the subject that I really was keen to touch on today because, like I said, when I got told, oh, you shouldn't use that word's taboo, I think we're just hiding behind the fact that this word exists to keep us alive. There are circumstances where things can be written in a way that feels constraining. And I do think it's up to us to determine, are we being constrained because it adds value, i.e., keeping us alive and letting us go home to families? But sometimes things are just not written right, and we should be challenging the fact that, if we wanted to make sure that things are representative of what we need, then we should be challenging and saying, this feels too constraining. I don't think this is right. I think if we can do X, Y, and Z, then this will give us the same benefit. But it will also feel less onerous. Um, there's a couple of examples where I can remember doing some audits, and we would just have a really simple question of, do you think that's the right thing to do? And you would just have to demonstrate, was this the right thing to do? And sometimes I think you don't want to get it wrong. I think a lot of human behavior comes into, we want to make sure we are doing the right thing and we're following the process, whether it's written down or not written down. But it's just being able to demonstrate that when there's situations that happen. And I always come back to the fact of, are you able to demonstrate this should someone not be able to come home? If you're if something happened on an impact that was so severe that that person wasn't going to come home, I do think most companies would change the process to make sure that that was not an option, and that a lot of the aspects around dangerous processes and stuff were validated and informed, just looking through that lens of making sure that person could come home. There's some examples at the moment where we're looking at smartphones for children. So I have 3 children. The youngest is about to go to secondary school in September. And it is looking at whether there are opportunities for smartphones not to be in school. What are the reasons why? Because, it's distraction. Sometimes we have our daughter message us when she's meant to be in class, and you'll see my text messages going, why are you messaging me? You're meant to be in class. But, on the one hand, it's aspects of, are we meant to be in class and we're meant to be learning and studying? But the other thing is, I would like to know if she couldn't get home. So having a phone is making sure that she's safe and I know she's going to get home. So my viewpoint on mobile phones is going to be very different to someone who doesn't have that um that need to check up on her, I guess could be the word that I'm trying to say. But but it is, I guess the word compliance enables you to have a good discussion about what does that look like for different groups. And I think sometimes we don't have those conversations. We try to have a conversation with our children of, can you limit it? Can you adjust? We look at, kind of how much they're using their mobile phones. So obviously the youngest has got 0. and Hattie's quite a high user of it. So one of the things is about limiting the fact of what that looks like to you and how you could and monitoring and measuring it, recognizing it when it becomes a concern. Is it a concern? And what could we do to put steps in place to get more compliance on it, should we need to? What I'm trying to evaluate is, do we have an issue? Does that mean that I have a problem? And, my background obviously is quality engineering and looking at problem solving. And I think you have to start with the aspect of, do I have a problem? And if I have a problem, how big is the problem? Is the problem on a scale of 1 to 10, of 10, that person is not going to be able to come home to their family or friends? Should it go wrong, then we have a massive problem. To, at the end of the day, does that mean that my daughter might miss a bus? But at the end of the day, there's other people around her who can phone us, So on the scale of things, it's evaluating how large that problem is as to how much compliance should be sat around that process or that security. So I've kind of gone quite heavy on compliance, but I am really quite passionate about making sure that when we are working with or evaluating compliance, it's trying to think about it through the lens of a human, and looking at it from, when you make it more tangible and more what's in it for them, what's in it for me is that I get to go home. What's in it for me is that I get to see my family for one more day. What's in it for me is that it's not about just ticking the boxes and going, oh yeah, the amount of audits that I've sat in companies and I'm like going through and they're like, oh yeah, everything's fine. And I'm like, okay, that's great, so I won't find anything. And you're just there going, oh yeah, I didn't raise that because I didn't think it was important. Oh no, I didn't raise that because I didn't think it's important. I'm like, these things is not about ticking boxes. Compliance is not about that. It's just about doing the right thing. It's about keeping people safe, respected, and protected within your organization. So I would say that I'm probably not the most liked person because when I come and do an audit, I am going through your business to make sure that number one, people are safe. Number two, people are respected. And number three, people are protected and that people are adding value to your business. I don't see, I want people to understand why they're doing something and know what they're contributing to. And I recognize it's a big thing for someone to have an independent auditor come in and go through that side of the business. But the amount of businesses that I've been in, and I'm very nice about it, is, I just want the best for that person and I want the best for you. And if you choose not to, or you've chosen a route and you can demonstrate that there's other things in place that I haven't seen, because obviously it is just a snapshot in time, then I'm perfectly satisfied. But what I don't want ever is have, when I'm doing the work that I'm doing, on my conscience that someone has died because I didn't raise an issue or a safety issue or a quality issue or a environmental issue just because I didn't think it was important enough. If anything, I over deliver. I give a lot of information really quickly to people. And I know that can create overwhelm as well, because at the end of the day, And I think that's one of the downsides of the compliance is how to relate that back in a way that adds value to you and to you as a business. And I'm trying to get better at that because I think it is really important to sort of underpin the fact of I'm not trying to say that know what to do. I'm purely just trying to have a conversation as to how that could look in the future, and what maybe that could look like to you. But it doesn't mean to say that it needs to be done in X, Y, and Z. Do you know what? One of the things that surprises me when I look at compliance is standards. A lot of companies are beholden to um, the ISOs, like ISO 9001, which is the quality standard, ISO 14001, which is the environmental standard. But the difference is of how those standards sometimes are implemented. And, I've from especially from my automotive background, um, I always got encouraged that internal audits are a key aspect to the business, predominantly because you're finding your own fault. And again, it's about that health and safety, making sure that everyone gets home, making sure the product is the best product it could be, and making sure everything is getting done at the right time, at the right stage. But again, this comes completely down to my background and where I've worked. So one of the things that I look at is when I go into organizations that maybe haven't experienced or have that experience in there, you can see that sometimes a lot of things have been put in place because that is what is being asked for, but the context has been slightly missed. And that's, to me, that's not being compliant. Compliant is about making sure, from a business point of view, and this can be big business to small business, at the end of the day, how do you ensure that you are getting the best for your business, the best for you? Um, and what does that look like in your journey, in your world? You could probably sit while I'm on this podcast and go, okay, let me think of some areas where actually I do compliance without even realizing. I'm all for system-led compliance, and I don't mean a system as in the sense of, like having Canva to do marketing or something like that. It's about having um, a set process. They always use making a cup of tea, but having a set process to get the best cup of tea. But everyone knows that there are so many different processes because people like their tea different. So, but it's those kind of things that you go through in your set steps because you will get the best result that you want, based on what your values are, based against what you know and against what you are expecting. And when you're evaluating and understanding that, then you will find that you will start measuring your compliance to that, whether intentionally or unintentionally. You will know what a good process looks like and what, you know, are well, they call them opportunities for improvement, but or improvements, or what could change to enable that to be a little bit better. But the main purpose of this podcast really was to kind of reclaim and own that word compliance, because you're here because of my background and it may not be for you, but having that understanding of how to get you home, how to do the right thing and have the right process around you is going to be so important for really being able to step into the kind of level of impact that you want to have, because most paths have some level of compliance or expectation or social values or norms that need to be in place for you to be able to achieve that. And by understanding that will enable you to be able to step in and identify what's working and what's not working and how to get yourself home safe. So I know that was quite a heavy episode, but I think it's something that I really want to emphasize is that compliance is just about keeping people safe, respected, and protected. And if you live up to those values, your business as a whole, yourself individually, will uphold certain standards that you will just embed as a good practice. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining me in the pink room, talking about what no one tells you about compliance and why it's more human than you think. And again, like any, please don't hesitate to email me at bryony@thinkpragmatic.co.uk